The Music is Life podcast has our own merch now over on tpublic.com. Click the link below in the video description. Looking for some new threads? We got t-shirts, long sleeves, hoodies, crew neck sweatshirts, tank tops, baseball tees, and also clothes for kids and onesies for your little infant metalheads. Don't want clothes but love the Java? We got you covered with coffee mugs and travel mugs. Need protection for your electronics? We've also got phone and laptop cases. We've got everything you're looking for at the tpublic.com Music is Life podcast store. Use my link below for fast service. Thanks for your support. TerraNut is proud to offer you a natural nut bar chock full of healthy fats, minerals, and protein that meet your demands. Go to their website, www.terranut.com. You can order from them directly and they will ship it to you. Use my coupon code LOUMAVS and you will get a 25% discount on your first order. TerraNut Superfood Snacks, www.terranut.com. Don't forget to use coupon code LOUMAVS at checkout. Fuel your life.
We are ready and waiting for you now. If it's a fight that you dare see, we've acquired our strength through pain. No more are we pathetic again. You are the reason why we claim that we've all become this way. And I regret this prison that I created for myself.
Thanks for tuning into the Music is Life podcast. This is your host, Lou Mavs. Find out everything you need to know about the show over at musicisLifepodcast.com and pray I beat this sore throat.
What's the matter with you?
A frog in my throat.
Oh, you've got a frog in your throat. Stand up! Say, what's the matter with you? Are you crazy or something?
Hot tea, good stuff. Okay, somewhat back to normal. So, on today's episode, I was going to have James Lilquist from Beyond Bushido on board so we could discuss Emmet Otter's Jugband Christmas. James is currently dealing with some personal issues that I don't want to get into. I want to respect his privacy, but everything is okay. My thoughts are with James. Nothing bad happened, but again, I just don't want to get into it. Our meeting was delayed and is delayed until further notice. So instead, I brought on board a friend of mine from St. John's University, Melissa Scopolitis.
And it looks like ladies' night here at the gallery.
Who was an intern for the Jim Henson Company. So I thought it'd be cool to have her on an episode of Music is Live podcast so we could discuss her time with the Henson Company, her thoughts on the Muppets, what got her into the Muppets, and also her opinions on Emmet Otter. This is a pretty cool episode. Melissa was awesome and answered every question that I gave her, and she was wonderful. She's welcome back on the show anytime. And James, again, you owe me. Just kidding. Well, am I? Anyways, enjoy part 1 of the Music is Live podcast Muppet special, just in time for Christmas. Whoever's watching, thank you for watching. I hope you have either a Merry Christmas, or a Happy Hanukkah, or a Happy Kwanzaa, or a Happy Festivus, or a Happy Saturday if you don't celebrate. Anyways, enjoy the show. So in today's discussion of Emmet Otter, I wanted to ask a friend of mine who actually worked for the Jim Henson Company as an intern, a fellow graduate from St. John's University, Mrs. Melissa Scopolitis.
That's my kind of woman.
Melissa, how you doing? Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Lou. I'm happy to be here.
Little backstory on how we met. We both met on a Facebook Muppets group that I don't think either of us are a part of anymore. It got too political, so I was like, I can't deal with this. And
I'm not even sure which one it was at this point. I'm on so many different ones.
I didn't know there were that many. As I mentioned, you were an intern at the Jim Henson Company, right?
Yes, I was.
Cool. First off, let's discuss your love for the Muppets. How far back do you go with them?
I mean, probably like most folks, going back to the days of Sesame Street when I was, a little kid. I just loved the show growing up. And, as I got a little bit older, I fell in love with the Muppet Show when it was on weekly. I was born in 1977, so the Muppet Show was actually still on in its first run. Initially was the later seasons. So I have a special love for the later seasons, like seasons 4 and 5, because that's what was actually on airing for the first time when I was a kid. Just watching watching it and the big giant television we had when I was a kid in our den in my old house. I was, listening to Sesame Street records on my little record player when I was a kid. Just was just one. I just always loved the Muppets, and I was always kind of one of these like nerdy kind of fans from the beginning because I used to love to read. So I would read the backs of all the record sleeves. So I knew the names Jim Henson and Frank Oz. I understood pretty early on that these were people doing the different characters. And I just love them so much. They played a very integral part, in my artistic, journey and just in growing up. I think as a person, some of the values I've taken from all the specials and TV shows over the years. I remember going to see Great Muppet Caper in the movie theater when I was a kid, Follow That Bird. And, as the years went on, we always went to go see, whatever the new project was that was out. I remember even my parents taking me to see The Dark Crystal when I was very little. Probably freaked me out at the time.
Oh, yeah, but that was a masterpiece.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I've just always been a fan. I think there might have been like a very, very brief period in my early teens, preteens, when I was like, I thought I was a little too cool for the Muppets. And I regret now that I threw out a couple of my Fisher-Price dolls that, are worth, ridiculous amounts on eBay and things like that.
Throughout your retirement, Melissa.
That's right. That's right. But for the most part, though, I've always been a Muppet fan. I don't remember not having them as a part of my life in some way, shape, or form.
Very cool. Yeah, I'd probably have to say the same thing. For me, it was definitely Sesame Street that opened me up to what Muppets were. But when it came time for the Muppets themselves, obviously Kermit was the gateway between both shows, Muppet Show and Sesame Street. I recall that the Muppet Show, I think its first run may have ended, but Saturdays at like 7:30 on Channel 2 in New York, WCBS, they would still play those episodes. So I got to see them, and that's probably like my earliest recollection of what the Muppets were. What made me fall in love with them was Muppet Babies.
Oh, yeah.
From there, it came my love for the Muppet movies, my favorite being The Great Muppet Caper. I still get choked up when I hear Rainbow Connection. I got to share that with my daughter last year. She was like swaying to it as I was holding her. And yeah, I got a little choked up. Yeah, Lou Mavs is a softie. Bite me. Anyway, I never did get to see any of the Henson films in the theaters. I do remember my first two films in the theater. It was either Ghostbusters or Gremlins. But I can't say it was
in the theater. Yeah, I remember seeing Gremlins in theater.
I can't say I was cheated. Like Ghostbusters or Gremlins. That does not suck. With the Muppets, though, what I recall growing up, especially which is why I love them still to this day, is the fact that Jim Henson, there was something about him where there was heart in everything he did, whether it was Sesame Street, whether it was the Muppets, whether it was the films. Prime example for me, Keep Christmas With You from Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. That's my favorite Christmas song. And I don't like Christmas songs except for that one. Just the memories that I carried with me from my youth to today, and now I get to pass it on to my kid. There was heart that Jim Henson had that, as much as I still love the Muppets today, I feel like there's something missing.
I agree. And, I don't think there's any one person at fault for that. I think it's a variety of things of why it is. Obviously, I think, it's a different world now, without getting too deep, but, it's a different world now. The goals are different, I think, in what they're trying to do with the Muppets than they were back then. And, and then again, so many of the core people who helped bring these characters to life, including the writers, which is, I don't think the writers get enough credit because everybody talks about Jim Henson and Frank Oz, which is great. And yes, of course, they embodied the soul of these characters, but they were also going off scripts that these amazing writers,
Don Salim being one of them, if I recall correctly.
Don Salim, Jerry Jewell. There's just so many people that were involved behind the scenes that I don't think get their due overall, who were just such talented. John Stone, who directed Christmas Eve on Sesame Street, like all these people who just understood what made them tick, that I think is really what's lacking now. And as a longtime fan, it's frustrating because I still want to support them. I still love these characters. And, I want to be excited about the next project, but I think they're missing what made people love them so much. And I think also the fact that, back then the Muppets were really seen like celebrities, where I think now they're almost seen almost like cartoonish and more nostalgia. Whereas back then, Kermit could go sit on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and you really believed he was speaking to Kermit, and now everything is very safe and scripted and, where Jim Henson would just kind of say things ad-libbed off the cuff. And that's what made the performances memorable. And, Miss Piggy was on magazine covers and all these things that, you just don't see them doing now. And I think that's a big chunk of what's missing, of what made them so revered, to the general public.
Yeah, you can say the same thing even about like someone like Frank Oz. I remember seeing a talk show with him in the 70s where he came on with the Cookie Monster puppet, but the moment Cookie Monster's mouth opened and his eyes jiggled, it's like you forgot he was there. Like that transference of character, it made it feel like it was real. There was definitely something special about that original crew. And I will say this, I loved Steve Whitmire as Kermit. And I'm not knocking Matt Vogel. I think he's an excellent puppeteer and obviously very talented. Otherwise, he wouldn't be working on the Muppets and Sesame Street. But I just feel like Steve carried over a little bit of what Jim left. That heart was still there. So I do miss him as part of the crew. I know he's doing stuff on his own right now, which is great, but hopefully we'll still get more Muppet related material in the future, and hopefully there'll be a new group of kids out there, a new group of people who will look at it with new eyes and not just nostalgia. At least that's what I hope, because the company that owns the Muppets also owns Marvel and Star Wars. So please keep them alive, do them justice.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Let's talk about how you ended up interning at the Jim Henson Company. Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So actually, in an odd kind of way, it goes back to being at St. John's to some degree. I went into St. John's wanting to be an art major. I wanted to get into graphic design. When I had gone initially for my first interview with the art department there, they had a small little postcard with the famous picture with Jim Henson sitting with Kermit in the theater seat that we sitting in front of, like the Muppet mural that's all over the internet. Very famous promotional photo of Jim Henson. And in the little brochure that the St. John's art department had given me was listed a whole bunch of companies that they had done internships with prior, and they had experience and connections with the Jim Henson Company. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. But I wasn't sure what capacity I wanted to be with Henson, as far as, I had no background in puppeteering. I never thought in a million years to even work for Henson, but I thought, well, that's kind of cool, because I'd love to do something with them. I thought maybe doing more illustration or some kind of artwork for them would be an interesting way to go. From there, when I was starting to go, apply for internships in my senior year, kind of same kind of thing. You had to just send out applications, and back then it wasn't as easy now because we didn't have the internet resources that we have now. We can just Google something and find out, oh, here's how you can contact the Jim Henson Company. You had to kind of go through different channels. At the time, speaking of Steve Whitmire, I had been friendly with him since I was 13 years old. We were email friends from very early on, like the early 90s.
No kidding.
Yeah. So we became friends kind of almost the same way we met, on a Muppet. It was a message board at the time. It wasn't, a chat room or a Facebook. It was a message board on the old Prodigy internet service when I was 13 years old. And there was a Muppet
Wow, that's
fan.
a throwback. Wow.
Yeah. There was a Muppet message board, and Steve was on there. Dave Goelz was on there briefly. Jerry Jewell, the late Jerry Jewell, was also on there. And a couple other people, behind the scenes, Henson people. And I just became friends with Steve. We chatted. He had already been amazing by inviting me to the set of Muppet Treasure Island when I graduated high school. And I remember...
Was that filmed in New York?
No, that was in England, in Shepperton. At Shepperton Studios in England.
So you flew to England to help out with that?
No, I didn't work on it. I had just graduated high school. I happened to be traveling to England as part of my graduation gift. I was traveling to England with my dad. We went to London for a little vacation. And Steve had said, well, while you guys are in town, come on by. And he arranged a visit for us to the set.
That is so cool.
Which was amazing. And, we spent the day with him and, just got to hang out and met Tim Curry, and who's my favorite actor of all time. So that was a thrill.
The only man who could play a transvestite and the devil and a funny butler and pull all three off.
Yes, exactly. So it was just a thrill for me meeting Tim Curry and Kermit the Frog in the same day. It just didn't get better for me at that point at 17 years old as a high school graduate. But at the time, I had kind of told Steve about, my goal of going into college and wanting to do this internship with Henson. And he said, well, when the time comes, let me know. And he wrote a letter of recommendation. Now, I just want to make clear, he did not get me the internship. I sold myself when I went in there for an interview and all that. I'm sure the recommendation helped, but he didn't pull strings to
You got in on your own merit. He
Right.
basically vouched for you, but it was all you. I totally get it.
Exactly. So, and it was great. I originally applied for a graphic position at the Henson offices in Manhattan, and they already filled the position. So I remember one of like the recruiters calling me and saying, well, and this was after I had interviewed with them and everything. And they said, well, we don't have anything in the graphics department, but we have an opening in the Muppet Workshop. That was a no-brainer.
Jackpot.
Exactly. So I said, okay, well, it has nothing to do with my major. I don't care. Whatever you want me to do, I'll go do it. Because how many internships do you actually get to work hands-on with whatever the production company is, whatever the company is that producing that you actually work on? It wasn't just getting coffee for people. It was working hands-on with the Muppets. They had an in-house database of characters for their own reference. They were looking up something for production. Everything was very detailed. For example, they had an extra, frog that was maybe used as a background character on the Muppet Show or something that wasn't Kermit. We had to take a picture of that frog, put the details in, what color is he, what size is he, what was he used on before, and it was basically just building this whole database of characters and props and some costume pieces and things like that. So I had to photograph all these things for this in-house database. And at the time, it was really funny because, we were using like a 1 megapixel digital camera at the time. I had no background in photography, which I think is also a kind of help. I mean, I did photography a little bit at St. John's. I was in the Spectator Humor magazine.
I remember the Spectator. I think Howie Pearl was the editor at one point.
Yeah, my friend Howie, yes.
You know Howie?
I know Howie very well, yes.
How's he doing?
He's good. He's very good.
Please give him my best.
He's living down in Florida now. He actually lives near my mother-in-law, which is kind of funny. Kind of small.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's doing very well. Yeah, I talk to him pretty regularly. His birthday was recently. We message each other here and there.
He was always a very funny guy. He was always very nice to me. So, I always appreciated that. Hey, Howie, hope you're watching this.
Yeah,
I got my own podcast. Ha!
He's a good guy.
Very cool. So were you College of Professional Studies?
No, I was in St. John's College. I was going for a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts.
Oh, St. John's College. Okay.
Yeah, so most of my classes were in St. John's Hall, a couple I think in Sullivan Hall at the time. But being on Spectator, I had a little bit of photography experience, but going back to Henson, I really didn't have any other, photography experience. So I trained my eye for photography, and because I do dabble in it a little bit now on the side. So I think that kind of helped in that regard. So while it wasn't for graphic design, I think it helped develop another art of avenue that I didn't think I was going to be doing anything with, and it's kind of proved pretty good the past several years especially. And it was a great experience. I mean, again, it was only a brief short month, few spring semester from January to like April of '99 that I was there. And it was like me and one other intern, but it was really cool. I had the opportunity to build props for the TV show Bear in the Big Blue House for their Halloween episode. And I got to visit the set of Sesame Street. I got to do a lot of different things while I was there that, I wouldn't have gotten to do, I think, in other aspects. And again, so it wasn't a typical internship. Maybe it didn't necessarily help prepare me for, what I'm doing now in life, but as a fan, it was a dream come true, and I don't regret, at all. And it's just to have that opportunity. So I worked with my dream company. I'm very proud to say that. Even though it was a brief time.
I think that's a wonderful story, and that's a great memory that you just shared with everybody. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you mentioned your friendship with Steve Whitmire. Does that still continue to this day?
It does. Yeah, it's funny because we don't talk regularly. I do follow his video. I'll plug him. He has a wonderful YouTube thing that he does. It's called Cave In, where he does this character that he's built. And, it's called Weldon the IT Troll.
Yes, I've seen that. That was pretty funny.
And, obviously Steve's a great, puppeteer. He built the puppet, he's got, a production studio wherever he does that. It's near his home. He has a nice crew behind the scenes that he works with. I think his wife is involved, and, he does these great production pieces. The gist of it is he takes live phone calls. He does it live. He does it about once a month. He should have one coming up, if not this Friday, next Friday. He usually does it like the second or last Friday each month. And he takes live calls through, and he uses the Discord app to do that, which is sometimes a little wonky, but it's, it's effective. And it's great because he can reach everybody. I mean, he has callers from Europe, from Spain. He's got calls from all over the world, which is really interesting. And, he just they share stories, and he kind of intersperts it with little production pieces. Sometimes he has guests on. He's had like Lou Ferrigno on. He has like these, celebrity guests on occasionally that are fun, and they interact with Weldon. They do little skits and things, and it's a really fun interactive show. It has a lot of like that kind of Muppet zaniness. You could definitely feel the influence there.
Again, a carryover of the heart of Jim Henson. So
yeah.
I could see why you would have that. I'll definitely post the link in the description below so people could directly see it, subscribe to it. Yeah, anything to support Steve Whitmire, because I just, I don't use this word often, but I think he's a genius. So
yeah, he is. He's very talented. I mean, he's very talented. He's a very spiritual guy. He's a very interesting guy to talk to. He has a lot of amazing stories, a lot of amazing experiences, even outside of performing and puppetry. He's just, he does a lot of amazing things, with his time. And I know he volunteers with a wildlife preserve out in California, Tippi Hedren's Preserve, Shambhala, it's called. I know he's on the board there with his wife. So they've tended to. He does production pieces for them, and he's involved in a lot of amazing things. And he's just a great guy. And the last time I saw him was actually 2018 at a convention in Philly. We don't see each other very often, but we keep in touch. And it's great to talk to him often now, because back in the day when I first started communicating with him, it was very hard because of his schedule with the Muppets, and he just wasn't the computer guy. And now, because of today's technology and you have to promote yourself, he's always on social media. So now it's easier to get in touch with him now than it was back then. So, we don't call each other up on the phone per se, but I'll shoot a message on Instagram. He'll respond within a day or so. We'll chit chat back and forth. When I saw him again in 2018, my husband had met him for the first time, and Steve was just saying he was in awe of how long we've been talking to each other. He goes, we've known each other for 30 years technically, and it's true.
Yeah, you knew you since you were a kid. So
yeah. So, and I think, he's almost kind of got that proud papa kind of, vibe with me. He came out, gave me a big hug. He's just a good guy. I really don't think there's a bad bone in his body.
Mr. Whitmire, if you ever want to be on my podcast, please consider this an open invitation. I'd love to have you. Oh, there's your cat, Mozart. He's so cute. At the time that you were interning there, did you get to meet Frank Oz?
I've met Dave Goles. The first time I met Dave Goles was actually during my internship. I've met him several times since. He had come in for a day. They were filming at the time. I think it was the Hallmark. It wasn't the Hallmark channel yet. It was a channel called Odyssey that was owned by Hallmark. That I think now has become what the Hallmark channel is on cable. But at the time, it was called the Odyssey channel. It was like a family, oriented channel. They were showing some Muppet stuff back in the day. And they were filming these little interstitials, in between commercials, with the different Muppet characters. I forget what they called them. It would be like Gonzo. It's Gonzo, discusses, cooking or whatever. There's some kind of topic involved, and it was just a quick little skit, and it was kind of like Muppetisms. That's what they were called. They were called Muppetisms, and it basically had a little phrase, but it would show the characters doing something in relation to that phrase and kind of illustrating it physically or visually. And Dave Goles was in town to film one of those. Steve had come into town for one of those. Frank Oz had come into town one of those, but he came in on the day that I was not assigned to work.
Bummer.
So I only was working at 3 days a week during my senior semester at Henson. So that's all I was doing that semester for school. Credit was the internship. I forget how many hours it is for what it was at the time. It was 3 days a week. So of course he was there on the Tuesday and Thursday, and I was there Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they said to me, well, you can come in, but we're not going to have anything for you to do. And at the time, because I really wanted to be hired there, I was like, all right, I'm going to back off and not be the fangirl today and just not be in anybody's way and not come in that day, so I just let it be. And I regret it now because I could have had the opportunity to watch Frank Oz actually work in person. I have met him a couple of times since. I've had very nice interactions with him on Twitter. He's an amazing guy too. Very intense, very interesting guy. That's probably the only thing I regret with the internship was not going in the day that he was there to perform, because I really would have loved to have witnessed that in person. But, it is what it is,
I hear you. He's had such a great career as a director. He did direct a film that I thought was hilarious. I think it was Death at a Funeral. And
okay. Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yes.
But don't feel so bad about not getting to meet Frank Oz, because I blew my opportunity as well. I was working at the ASCAP building in Manhattan, my first full-time job out of college. And it was across the street from Lincoln Center. And in the same building, ASCAP was on the 3rd floor. On the 2nd floor was Sesame Workshop.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, should I? Shouldn't I? What could I do? I'm not a puppeteer. And I mean, I'm a musician, but reading music is not on my forte. And, at the time I was like, I don't write the kind of songs that would be good for Sesame Street. I write metal and hardcore songs. You can't have, you can have the Muppets going, rah, 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 but like that's who could have sung my songs, the Two-Headed Monster. But I digress. I'd have to say, though, two things. Number one, Jim Henson and Frank Oz, as good as any classic comedy team from
absolutely.
the old era. And I'd have to say, though, my single favorite Muppet performer would have to be, and God rest his soul, I'll always love him, Mr. Jerry Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
The voice of Emmet Otter. So now we have a good segue into our discussion of Emmet Otter's Jugband Christmas. This was originally a Canadian production that was broadcasted in 1977, and then I believe it premiered on HBO the following year in 1978, and then every year after that it was on broadcast television, but I think it was on Nickelodeon annually in the 90s.
Yeah, it was on Nickelodeon. I think it showed up on the Disney Channel at one point. I think also that Hallmark Channel, the Odyssey Channel we were talking about. Yeah, it's popped up in a few different networks over the years. Yeah.
And on top of that, though, there's different variations of it. Some have Kermit, some don't. The incarnation that was made for broadcast television has his narration, but that's the only one that does. The one that's available right now has Kermit in it, but no narration. But there are special features on the Blu-ray edition where they have outtakes and I think some things that they omitted from the final product. I actually saw the outtakes. Somebody posted them on YouTube. I thought they were hilarious.
They're very funny. Yeah, they're on the regular DVD as well, because that's what I have. I don't have the Blu-ray, but I have the DVD. It was like an anniversary DVD out a number of years ago, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize Frank Oz was supposed to be the voice of Mama Otter. I thought that was pretty funny when I heard that. I'm like, oh, I can't help but laugh every time I hear Frank Oz do a female's voice. Oh, my goodness. He does it so perfectly well. But, hey, he did my favorite Sesame Street Muppet, Grover. So, When did you first see Emmet Otter's Jugband Christmas?
Oh, wow. The first time I saw it.
For me, it was 2 years ago, the first time ever. I kid you not.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. I'm a newcomer to the game, but man, do I love it.
I don't know if I saw it initially when it was originally aired. I don't think I did. I think I did see it possibly in the early 90s, late 80s, when it was on one of these cable channels at the time. Because there was a period where I was just recording stuff constantly off of television, anything Muppet related. Nickelodeon used to do these Muppet matinees on Saturdays or Sunday afternoons. And I used to record hours of the Muppet Show and all these different specials. And I think Emmet Otter was one of those, because I know I have a very old copy that I burned to DVD from an old VHS tape. And I know it was a broadcast of Emmet Otter on one of those channels. I remember seeing it an advertisement for on the Disney Channel. So it must have been somewhere around there, early 90s, I want to say. It was probably the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I remember the Muppet matinees. They would actually air them on the weekdays too, because I remember being home from school in the summertime, and it would be Muppet Show, then Muppet Babies.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can't find the original Muppet Babies anywhere because it would probably cost them boatloads in copyright fees because of so much. Jim Henson got away with so much stuff, and they just said, "Yeah, no, we'll let you, Jim. Go ahead." And it's now it's no, you got to pay up. So that was the magic of Jim Henson. He could do no wrong.
He was also a very shrewd businessman, from what I hear. He had an amazing way with people, obviously. So I think that worked to his advantage. But I think also when it came down to it, he knew how to get things done. And, obviously, he built this empire of a company, But, knowing people who've worked for him for years, they said he was very direct about when he wanted to get things accomplished, business-wise, and made deals that, he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, I never heard anyone say a bad thing about him. They actually posted the footage from his funeral on YouTube, and I remember watching it. Frank Oz had such a beautiful tribute to him. Everybody did. Especially when all the Muppeteers got up and sang the song When the River Meets the Sea from Emmet Otter at his funeral. You can't help but get choked up and see that these guys had genuine love for him.
Yeah.
But, you have to be a shrewd businessman. Let's not forget that back in the day in 75, when SNL, Saturday Night Live, first premiered, there was a sketch that Lorne Michaels wanted to dedicate for Jim Henson.
The Land of Gorch, I think.
That's it. I remember reading that some of the writers said, we don't write for felt. And I think the terminology used by Mr. John Belushi was mucking fuppets was the exact word. But then he had his show called The Muppet Show. And even though it only lasted 5 seasons, it is on Disney Plus. I have the first 3 seasons on DVD. And it's funnier than anything SNL has done in the last 20 years. Except for anything with Bill Hader. He's great, but that's it.
He is good, Bill Hader.
Oh my God, he was great. It's It's like a living Muppet, that man. I mean, come on, he's great. Actually, that was my nickname in college too. I was in the Chapel Players group.
Oh, okay.
And funny story before we continue on Emmet Otter, I was a sound engineer for a couple of their musicals. So I'm up in the booth and there's no working microphone for anyone to hear me. So I had to scream out the window so I could get people's attention. And my buddy Jason Crawford, who was also in the Chapel Players group, he yelled out, "Hey, are you Statler or Waldorf?" Hence, I earned the nickname Muppet. Anyway.
It's interesting you mentioned the Chapel Players because when I was doing my internship at Henson, I was actually asked that semester by one of my fellow art majors that she was part of the Chapel Players. They were doing the production of Little Shop of Horrors. And
wow, no kidding.
Knowing that I was into the Muppets and puppetry and everything, and she said, would you want to puppeteer, the plant, for Audrey too, in this production? I said, I'd love to, but I'm starting my internship with the Jim Henson Company, and there's no way I was going to be around for rehearsals and all the stuff involved with getting the play off the ground. So I said, unfortunately, I got to turn it down. But now I'm thinking about that might have been an amazing experience too.
Yeah, Chapel Players was great. We did Bye Bye Birdie, and then we did the Christmas concert for charity where we raised money for St. John's Food Drive. Oh, no. And then the third thing that I did, which allowed me to get into Alpha Psi Omega, which is the Theater Honor Society. It's not a fraternity, it's an honor society, was an improvised adaptation of Oedipus Rex.
Oh, wow. Okay.
How they got away with that at St. John's, I'll never know. I was just a sound guy. But anyway, moving right along. So Emmet Otter, probably the first time I think anyone in Henson worked with puppet strings. I don't think they ever used puppet strings before in that vicinity, meaning that you could tell, with certain wide shots to see Emmet and his friends and his mom walking or running or moving, there would actually be people above it, not under it, to control the puppets. Yeah. Would you agree to that?
They may have done it here and there before, but I think Emmet Otter was probably one of the first productions where it was a good portion of marionette technique and radio control too. I unfortunately never got to meet him. This brilliant effects mechanical engineer, his name was Faz Fazakis, which is actually where they got Fozzie's name from. He kind of rigged up all these different special effects, like, how the otters row a boat and, the birds flying over the pond and all these different things you see in the special. It was a very different set than I think they were used to working on. It was very detailed. Production-wise, it's a beautiful special. Even just the lighting, like the sunrise and the sunset over the pond and the snow and the way they did the little houses with the village. And you believe that this place exists somewhere, which is part of the magic of what Jim was so brilliant at, creating these worlds.
I think they made the stage where they did everything, I think it was 55 feet long, if I recall correctly. It's insane how detailed everything is, from the way the houses were built, the way that the river flowed. Again, there was magic there. It definitely shined through. If I recall correctly, though, this was the first time Paul Williams and Jim Henson ever had a working relationship.
I believe so. I believe that was their first collaboration, yes.
I mean, the songs that he wrote for Emmet Otter, I mean, to this day, my daughter always sings Brothers,
I love that song.
Yeah, they look adorable singing it, but I think they should have sang Barbecue regardless. The River Bottom Gang, probably one of the funniest group of villains that I ever saw. But were they even villains, or were they just like, punks, I guess? What would you say?
Yeah, they were kind of like the town bullies, the town, renegades, for lack of a better word. They were just kind of this unruly kind of little group that just kind of wreaked havoc wherever they went. They were obnoxious. They were very noisy.
Yeah, they were punks. Such great musicians. I mean, the Nightmare song, there's so much about it that reminds me of Parliament Funkadelic meets Alice Cooper. I loved it. To this day, that's actually a song that I'll add on my classic rock playlist.
That's the genius of Paul Williams as a writer. I mean, he can do all kinds of different styles of music. He can write these beautiful ballads like the Rainbow Connection, and he can do stuff like the River Bottom Nightmare Band songs. He's just very talented that way. I mean, I'm a fan of his music and of his generically non-Muppet related. I love Paul Williams. It's about genius. And he's written for everybody who's anybody in the music industry. And he was the president of ASCAP for a while, and he's still working now. He was involved with Daft Punk. Like, he's, the guy doesn't stop.
I did not meet him when I worked at ASCAP. I wish I did.
I met him briefly back in 2013, I think it was. Carnegie Hall was doing a musical world to Jim Henson tribute, and Paul was actually there in person. There was 2 shows that day. I got to meet him in between the 2 performances, and he came out, the stage door, and just got a quick picture with him, said hello, I love your work, basically. And he was very nice, very approachable, really, really interesting guy. And the documentary they did about him a few years back, Paul Williams Is Still Alive, is an excellent, highly recommended documentary about his career in general and just some of the battles he had to deal with, with some of his addiction issues and things like that throughout the 70s. And he's amazing,
Yeah, he never gets any credit for his acting. He was in one of the Planet of the Apes films.
Yeah, he's actually a really good actor too. Yeah, he's been in a bunch of stuff that, he was a guest on The Odd Couple. Like, he's done so many different things, acting wise, music wise. He's done a little bit of everything.
What was it about Emmet Otter that you loved the most about it?
I think the two things that stand out to me is I really like the design of the characters. And I know Emmet Otter was originally a children's book that was not Muppet created or Henson created, but the builders, built these puppets based on these illustrations from this children's book that they were just beautiful looking characters. I mean, it was Wendell the porcupine. He looks like a porcupine, like just the physical design of these characters, I think, was one of the things that I really liked about as a kid. And the music.
I would say those things too. I mean, I never read the book of Emmet Otter when I was a kid. That wasn't something that we had. I don't even remember it seeing it in my grade school library. The privilege of having a child and being able to watch this with her, because again, I only came across it because it ended up being on Amazon Prime one time. I needed a break from watching Sesame Street because it was the same 5 seasons that were available on Prime. And I said, okay, she likes Muppets. Let me see if there's something else for her. And it was there. And I watched it with her. We both fell in love with it. And from there, we were able to find Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. And so many memories of my youth came back, because I think they stopped showing it on PBS in 1988.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
But the cool thing is that in Astoria, Queens, at the Museum of the Moving Image, there's an actual exhibit dedicated to Jim Henson still there. Everything from Sam and Friends up until the point where Henson sold everything to the company that we won't mention. You know who it is. They also have showings of some of the older Muppet material, including Emmet Otter and Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. Did you get to see any of that before the pandemic?
I actually was one of the donors for that exhibit. It's a permanent exhibit at the Museum of the Moving Image. They had done a Kickstarter campaign back when they were still trying to get everything, completed with it to get it opened. And I was one of the donors. So I actually got to attend the opening night ceremony, so to speak, for all the donors, all the Kickstarter donors, which was really great because we were like the first people to see it before it opened to the public. They had a giveaway rewards for, donating for like whatever level you donate. You got a different award. I got like a t-shirt, and they had the collectors. They were these special edition chocolate bars based on the characters of Fraggle Rocks. Each one had different Fraggle on the wrapper. The exhibit's amazing. I actually have friends who actually have pieces in the exhibit and who helped install the exhibit. And I have also friends who have some of their stuff on display there that they owned. One of my friends, Austin, he has some hand puppets that are made of some of the old, I think, Wilkins and Wonkins from the old coffee commercials. There were these hand puppets that if you collected like things off the coffee cans, you sent away and you got these little hand puppets in the mail. And Austin had them. He found them on eBay or whatever it was. And his puppets are in the exhibit. Yeah, I've attended many of the screenings there over the years. I'm not a museum member because I'm not close enough to, really take advantage of the membership. But I've attended many Muppet-related events at the museum over this past several years. The Jim Henson Legacy runs it, and they do an amazing job. The gentleman who runs it, Craig Shemin, is a longtime writer for the Muppets. He's a friend of mine, also a former Henson intern. He does amazing work in, keeping all these programs going over there. I think they just had one for the new Fraggle Rock series and the anniversary of Fraggle Rock, where they had some of the behind-the-scenes folks from the original series and some of the new, showing old, clips. I know they did it recently, a Halloween thing. They unfortunately haven't been there in a while. Last time I was there was 2019, I think, right before the pandemic for my birthday. I had gone with my sister because she hadn't been to the exhibit yet, and she was thrilled seeing Cookie Monster in person. She loves Kuzbanian babies from the Muppet Show, so she was really excited to see all those things up close. And actually in the felt, so to speak. So
I've seen some of the Wilkins and Wonkins commercials on YouTube. I think they're hilarious. They even have the Wheels, Flutes, and Crowns commercials where you saw the original incarnation of Cookie Monster with teeth in it.
Yes.
Obviously doesn't have Cookie Monster's voice. Seeing that was insane. And you really begin to appreciate the fact that Henson was admittedly was a fan of Howdy Doody. He was the go-to guy for a lot of these companies, comparable to almost George A. Romero, the director of Night of the Living Dead. I mean, he started a film production company to make commercials for local businesses in his area in Pittsburgh. It's great that people saw Henson saying, hey, look, we want to promote this product. Can you create a commercial for it? And that's how he got his start. And, that and Sam and Friends, of course, to see that it evolved into what it did with the Children's Television Workshop, which is now Sesame Workshop, to see the evolution of those characters. I mean, to this day, one of the funniest things that I've ever seen Jim Henson and Frank Oz do, I think it was on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was Kermit singing "What Kind of Fool Am I?" and Grover's interrupting him.
Oh, yeah.
You could see comedy genius right there. I don't think two normal people could do, but
Right.
through the world of the Muppets, it worked. And yes, I call Grover a Muppet. I don't care what anyone says.
Grover is a Muppet. They're all Muppets. I mean, I think that's the big, because it's funny, 'cause I see that discussion a lot online. Somebody posted something like that the other day. They're like, oh, I think they were talking about Oscar the Grouch or something, even though he's not really a Muppet. I says, yes, he is. I said on Sesame Street in the credits, it says Jim Henson's Muppets. To this day, it still says Jim Henson's Muppets.
It does, but since the company that we can't name is the owner of the Muppet name, does Sesame Workshop have to pay a license, I guess, to use that?
I don't know how that works, honestly. I don't know. I don't want to say anything that would be misleading because I don't know what the ins and outs of the legalities of that is. But I mean, I do know that they still the name, and mostly, that company owns the main Muppet characters, the Kermit, Miss Piggy. That's where I think a lot of the confusion comes in there. They think, because people have always said, well, how come this isn't on Plus? How come this isn't on, because it's not owned by them. It's still owned by Henson or Sesame or whoever it is, as the rights to it.
I think the initial deal that Jim made with them was, I'll give you the Muppets, but Sesame Street Muppets are off limits.
Yeah.
I recall that. And I think that up until the point he passed away and even after, that was always the bone of contention. It's a shame that a great film like Muppet Christmas Carol suffers because there was one scene that they removed. This is not on Brian Henson's fault, the company that we're talking about. They removed the scene where Ebenezer Scrooge, played by Michael Caine, is being sung to the song When Love Is Gone.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why apparently that was removed is because Michael Eisner, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was him. He says, oh, kids don't want to see that. And I'm like, but you're taking away context, from it. And when they reprise it at the end and they're singing When Love Is Found, it's like, well, when was it gone?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. To me, it just didn't make any sense when they did that. And when the Muppets were reverted to Sony for Muppets from Space, I thought that was a very funny film. Different from the other Muppet films, obviously, but still great in its own right. Unfortunately, as much as we feel like we own the characters, like meaning, fans like you and I, because we grew up with them and we love them this much, the truth is, business-wise, we don't. Mm-hmm. We own the memories and we hope they will just continue to do right by them. But, dirty world.
Right.
With me, with Emmet Otter, I mean, I just feel like, you mentioned the music, and I would also have to say that the casting was right for it. Jerry Nelson captured the essence of Emmet Otter perfectly.
Oh, absolutely. Jerry Nelson, I can't say enough nice things about him. He was just a multi-talented force of energy. I think people don't understand, yes, anybody could do a voice or come up with, the Count. Sure, we could all do like a vampire, Dracula kind of voice. But Jerry was an amazing actor, and his background was from acting. When I had met him shortly before he had passed on at that Carnegie Hall event, I had a really nice chat with him prior to the show, and he was saying how he started kind of doing like summer stock theater, like on Long Island and around Connecticut, and that's where his background is. And and just the puppetry came into play later. And he just channeled that talent of acting through the puppets. And that's why he was so amazing at different accents and, different, and his music is phenomenal too. I mean, he did this gorgeous album called True Daydreams several years back that was brilliant and had some Henson folks on there singing and stuff with him, and some of the musicians were session musicians that had done music for Sesame Street and whatnot. It's amazing. The whole album just captures like who Jerry was, and even right down to the cover art that he painted himself. Like, he just was a multi-talented creative genius and a really kind man. And I'm sorry I didn't get to know him sooner. When I had met him in 2013, it was unfortunately close to the end of his life. But in that short time, we became pretty friendly on Facebook, writing back and forth. And so much so that he mentioned me in the outtakes of Frank Oz's documentary, Muppet Guys Talking. And
I love that documentary.
Yeah, if you got the bonus material that they offered, there's a section where he talks about Muppet fans and everything, and he actually mentions me by name, and it floors me still. And a friend of mine pointed out that he goes, Melissa, is he talking about you? And it had to be, because it was filmed the day after the Carnegie Hall show. And he says, I met Melissa and her friend at the stage door, and he mentioned exactly what I had said to him. And I said, oh my God, this is somebody I grew up, admiring, and who, it's a small chat, he remembered into the next day. And he always told me several times after that how nice it was chatting that day.
That is such a beautiful story.
Yeah, it blows my mind that we had that kind of like little moment. And I used to keep, I had kept one of his last Facebook messages to me as like inspiration at my one of my former jobs when things were getting rough towards the end of my time there. And it was just, he just said, like, thank you, Melissa, that day was that was a great day, and our chat was one of the elements that made it perfect. And he just even eloquently worded things amazing. I said, that's one of the nicest things anyone ever said to me, period. It was just amazing. Well,
he struck me as an amazing guy, and such a wit and humor about him. When they were talking about probably this would probably have to go down as my favorite Jerry Nelson based sketch, and it was the Rapunzel one from the Sesame Street Newsflash, where he gives Rapunzel this nasally Brooklyn accent, and Frank Oz is Prince Charming, being as obnoxious as ever. All the love and credit in the world to the five guys: Jim, Jerry, Frank, and Dave Goelz and Richard Hunt. But my goodness, you put the three of them together, Jim, Frank, and Jerry, and it was just I'm thinking about it. That sketch is so ingrained in my DNA. It's like I can't even stop thinking about it. No, you know which one I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they pull that one out a lot for a lot of the the anniversaries and best of Sesame Street thing. That one always comes about because it's so brilliant. Their camaraderie is just unmatched. And again, I think that's one of the biggest things missing now is just that I'm not saying the guys aren't close behind the scenes and whatnot, but there's just something, even if it was scripted, it seemed spontaneous back then. However, for whatever reason, whether it was the way, because of the brilliance of their acting or just the, I don't know, but maybe they had more freedom to do stuff in the studio than they do now. I don't know what it is, but even the scripted stuff seemed very off the cuff. And that's to me what made it great. Just even the jokes and the one-liners and some of the sight gags and just all the things that go into it, I think is what made the Muppets as funny as it was, and what appealed to all ages too. And I think that's the other thing where I think now the Muppets unfortunately seem again more of a nostalgia. Oh, this is something I liked when I was a kid. It was for kids, blah blah blah. But back then again, the Muppets, adults loved them just as much.
I still love them to this day.
Yeah.
And, it makes me happy that my daughter, through Sesame Street and through, what I've shown her up until now, Emmet Otter, the Christmas toy, she loves it just as much as well. So, I'm forever grateful that I have that to share with her. Getting back to the Rapunzel sketch, what I loved about it was that I think they admitted in the Muppet Guys Talking documentary, they're like, well, we're supposed to create stuff that's educational for kids. And Frank Oz was like, who cares? It's funny. Keep going. Let's just do it. And, I'm so glad that little things like that slipped through. And of course, Frank Oz and Jerry Nelson were a great team too, especially when they did Grover and Fat Blue, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
I actually made a playlist of a lot of those sketches before YouTube forbade you from making playlists of what they would call kids material. So, even when you minimize it, you can't even watch, you can't even listen to it. So I don't get it, YouTube, but hey, thanks for, being the platform for my podcast. And I guess Emmet Otter, definitely hands down one of the best Christmas specials that I ever saw. I feel bad that I only discovered it a couple of years ago, but now it's a constant in our home around the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays. The next and final question is, what are your 3 favorite Muppet related Christmas specials? And I'll also allow you to include honorable mention.
The top 2 would be, and I probably just put it first because I was introduced to it first. My top 1 would be Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. Second would be Muppet Family Christmas. Third, probably The Christmas Toy. Honorable mention? That's tough.
I'm surprised you didn't say Emmet Otter.
I love Emmet Otter, but Emmet Otter was never a favorite because I think, again, like you, I saw it later in life. It wasn't ingrained in me as a kid, so I think that's a big part of it.
Understood.
Not to take anything away from it because I love it now, and I have the vinyl they put out in 2018, I think it was, for Record Store Day. It was a picture disc. I mean, I love it now. God, an honorable mention. I'm sticking with TV specials.
It could be anything. It could be film. It could be an episode of Muppet Show or Muppet Babies. Doesn't matter.
Well, then I guess for honorable mention, I would have to say Muppet Christmas Carol.
Okay, I'd have to say for me, 3 favorites, even though I only watched it a couple of years ago, but I'd have to give it to Emmet Otter at number 3. Number 2, I'd have to say Muppet Family Christmas. And number 1, I'd have to give it to Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. And my honorable mention, I would say The Christmas Toy. And I was actually introduced to that by my wife. I didn't even know of The Christmas Toy until she showed it to me on an old VHS tape of hers. And yes, it had the McDonald's commercials and, all that stuff. Yeah, they weren't trying to sell stuff to kids back in the day. No, were they? But yeah, I mean, so many great memories because of the Muppets. And, to this day, probably the greatest thing from my childhood that I still carry with me to this day. Probably more than the Looney Tunes. That would have to be number 2.
Yeah, I love the Looney Tunes as well. I mean, classic Warner Brothers. I love Looney Tunes.
Anything else you want to mention in regards to your time at Henson? I mean, I know career-wise you've gone a different path than what you interned at, but it sounds like it was a very memorable, special time for you.
Yeah, it really was. And the neat thing is that at the time, as part of my internship, I was required by St. John's art department to keep a journal of what I was doing each day. And then every once in a while, like, we'd meet with the professors and we would go over what the internship was. And at St. John's, if they felt that you weren't doing what you kind of wanted to do, or if they felt like, you're being taken advantage of as an intern, they would get you out of there. And I saw them do that with a couple of the students when I was there, because I remember one student was like, I'm kind of just sitting there reading a book, unless they asked me to do something, and they're like, get her out of there. We got to find her someplace else. Thankfully, that wasn't my case. I was always very busy there, but it was nice to have this journal because I have written down what date I was doing what and what I was working on, who I met, And again, it had nothing to do with my aspirations to go into graphic design. But I think in the long run, I guess it kind of did benefit me as far as the photography goes, because now I kind of do some photography on the side. Again, my husband plays adaptive sports, so I do social media and photography for his sports teams. I've done it. I used to volunteer for a dog rescue. I did some photography for them. Some of my photos were used for the town of Hempstead's calendar. I've had opportunities for the photo, and I think that goes back to Henson, because again, I took one photography class when I was at St. John's. I never really did photography otherwise. And again, shooting for Spectator, when they needed stuff, I would go around campus and take pictures of goofy things that we were doing for the photo shoots for the magazine. But as far as learning to set up a shot and using, backdrop and lighting, that all came from being at Henson. So I guess in a way it did kind of educate me. I did learn something out of the internship, aside from just, having the amazing opportunity as a fan to actually see hundreds of characters from all the different productions. And that, I have to say, was actually the neatest thing about it too, was that, because we had to photograph so much stuff that had been in storage for years. I mean, I saw stuff going back to the Ed Sullivan Show to, everything from the Dark Crystal to, they had just finished at the time when I was there, they would finish just wrapping filming on Muppets from Space and simultaneously Elmo and Grouchland. So they had characters coming back from the film sets to the workshop that had to be photographed and put into storage. So I was seeing new characters before people got to see them in those movies. And, the cosmic fish that were in Muppets from Space and all the kind of things that were made for that movie and the different Grouches from Elmo and Grouchland. And, but it was just amazing. And going back to the Christmas toy, I got to see Rugby Tiger in person and Mew Mouse and, all those characters that I was, every day was like Christmas. Back speaking of the holidays, every day was like Christmas being there.
I can imagine.
These boxes would come in from their storage facility and we'd have to go through them and photograph them. And it was like every day you were surprised at what the next thing was going to be from. And it was like, oh my God, it's it's Rugby, or it's Yorick from Ed Sullivan, or, and it was just amazing, as a fan, just to be part of it. And to also, I have to say, the people and the networking I made. I'm still friends with a lot of the people who were workshop, employees, some who had been hired by Jim himself, who had been there a long time. And it's nice because I still have this relationship with them on Facebook. And when I see them at events, it's always very nice to kind of catch up and say hello. So the networking aspect of it, and to work with these people who actually knew Jim, who, worked alongside him, with his advisement was really neat as well. And people I'd read about in all my behind the scenes Muppet books over the years, I got to work with some of these people. So that, as a fan, again, was really, really humbling and amazing, to be a part of.
I'd like to go to one of these if possible. I think it would be cool to kind of document it and highlight it on the podcast and just meet like-minded fans like us. Well, not just fans, but people who actually were in the thick of it. Yeah,
you definitely should. I mean, because they're always very different. They do a nice job. They're very intimate events because the theater at Museum Moving Image is not that big. It seats maybe several hundred, I would say. It's you always have this very intimate feel. I mean, I've seen Frank Oz speak there. He's done a couple of speaking engagements there, and a lot of times they'll have a signing. They actually had an Emmet Otter one a few years back that I unfortunately had to miss. By the time I had heard about it, the tickets were sold out. They had Paul Williams there, and he did like a CD signing for the soundtrack, and they screened the movie, and they showed the outtakes, and they had some of the other people who worked on the production there in person. And I heard it was a really, really nice event, so they're always very well organized, very fan friendly. They have Craig Shaman does a great job. He does raffles, he does giveaways, and all this kind of stuff during the screenings. They have Q&As, and it's really informative and it's fun. And then because if you get the tickets for the events, you get free admission to the exhibit is included. So if you haven't gone to the exhibit, it's a great thing to take people to.
I've been to the theater at the Museum of Moving Image once. This was back in 2005, and it was for Marx Brothers retrospective.
Oh, okay.
And they showed the Coconuts, and then right after that, they showed Duck Soup. Now, I'm a huge Marx Brothers fan. I own all the films, but I wanted the experience of seeing it in the theater. And I think they used the original reel because you saw some kind of tears in the celluloid of the 35 millimeter film, but still it was great to see it. I actually went with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and my future brother-in-law, who had never experienced the Marx Brothers before. And now it's like we quote Groucho to each other all the time. So I'm happy about that. I was so upset though in 2003, George Romero. Actually, I know I'm bringing him back into the conversation, but this is one of the missed opportunities of my life that I regret to this day. He came and did a retrospective where they showed Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead, and a couple of his other films. And he was there that entire weekend asking questions and missed it. But he's gone now, and I thought to myself, I'll see him again when he comes back again. No, I
never met George Romero. I'm not a huge zombie genre fan, but I do love the original Night of the Living Dead. I tried the other ones; they're okay, but I love the original. And my friend had met him at a convention that unfortunately I couldn't attend, and I gave him my DVD to have George Romero sign, and he got a really nice autograph on the Night of the Living Dead DVD for me. So I'm very thankful to have that now, especially since he's passed on.
You actually got George Romero's autograph. That is sick.
Yeah. He was, and personalized too, because like some of these people, they won't personalize the autographs. I'm not looking to sell it on eBay or something, so sometimes the celebrities at these conventions, they don't want to just sign something because they know you're going to just turn it around the next day and stick it on eBay up for auction. I always try to get them personalized if I can. And some people will only sign, and actually,
they don't personalize it.
If you want to actually hear a great Muppet related story about a convention guest that I met.
Sure, go ahead.
Are we allowed to curse on here? Let me start with that.
You're allowed.
Okay.
I'm not monetized, so you're allowed.
So the story is not gonna. You need it for this integrity of the story. Let me start there. So several years back, I had gone to Monster Mania convention in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, right outside the Philly area, and director John Landis was there, and he had a table. And of course, John Landis has a long history with Jim Henson and Frank Oz. Frank Oz has turned up in almost all of John Landis's movies in some kind of cameo of some sort.
The Blues Brothers being one of them.
The Blues Brothers, American Werewolf in London, So we were talking about a million different things. And firstly, he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. He took a lot of time with people. I talked to him for about 15 minutes, and we got on the topic of Jim Henson and Frank Oz. And John Landis, who also, as you might or may not know, had a cameo in the film The Muppets Take Manhattan, which Frank Oz directed.
I recall.
Yes, and he, as Leonard Weinstock, the Broadway producer, and Kermit goes in the costume and tries to get him to sell, buy his show, the script for his Broadway show. So John Landis tells the story to me of when he went to just not a premiere or anything, just a regular local theater screening of Muppets Take Manhattan. He took his daughter at the time, who was maybe about 5-6 years old, and they watched the scene where he was on the screen with Kermit, and after Kermit walks out, his daughter turned to him and said, "Daddy, you were mean to Kermit." And then all of a sudden, John Landis hears behind him, "You sucker!" And it turns out the guy yelling "You sucker" at him was Cheech Marin, who was there with his son watching the movie.
Oh my God, that's a funny story.
It was the best story and I've gone to a lot of these conventions over the years and met a lot of interesting people and some very big names. This has to be my favorite story that he's told, that I've heard from one of these people at these conventions.
I could just picture Cheech doing that.
That's the best part. Yeah, because again, it wasn't like at a premiere where there's a bunch of celebrities. It was just, "Hey, I'm here with my kid. I'm here with my kid," and he just hears this, that familiar voice.
Oh my goodness! I'm really happy you took time out of your day to discuss your time with the Muppets and Emmet Otter and your favorite Muppet holiday related specials. It means a lot to me that you took time out of your day. I know that you have work that you have to get to in the morning, so we're gonna wrap it up right now. But it really means a lot to me that you jumped on the podcast. I know that we had discussed this back when we first started speaking to each other on Facebook, and the reason why I brought you on now was because James Lilquist, who I do Rat Style Review with, we were talking about doing a Music is Live podcast episode about Emmet Otter, and I'm like, I know there's someone else I want to bring on, Melissa Scopolidis. So it means a lot to me that you're, that we finally met face to face, and then that, everything that I said I wanted to talk with you about, we have, and it means a lot to me. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. I was very excited to ask, and again, I could talk about the Muppets as the day is long. So, and to just recap those experiences and go down that memory lane is really great, because I love to speak. It was a very happy time in my life, and there's very few parts of my life that I think really stand out where I can say I was actually like genuinely happy with like the way everything was going, and that internship was definitely a time for me. And I just to relive it was really great, and I really appreciate you having me on. And I love just talking to Muppet fans and networking with other people like-minded like myself.
Definitely. Well, let's hope that you and I can go to a convention one day. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Awesome. Well, Melissa Scopolidis, thanks again for coming on the Music is Live podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a great Thanksgiving, and thank you to your listeners, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas to you too as well.
You too. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you to my guest, Melissa Scopolidis, for joining me on this episode of Music is Live podcast. If you want to know more, check us out over at musicisLivepodcast.com. Also, check out our parent network, RodStyleReview.com. Look at some of the other podcasts that we have on that. 2022 is looking like it's going to be real promising for the show. Going to be having more guests. Going to be doing a lot of more different things, more remotes, more interviews, more reviews, more top 10 lists. The future's bright and endless, so I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for subscribing. Thank you for giving this show the time of day. You know, this is all done in my house. I don't have the budget of some of the bigger podcasts, but I got the heart. And it really means a lot to me that you even give it the time of day. So thank you. And again, wishing all of you out there a safe and wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Saturday, and Happy Festivus. And above all, have a Happy New Year. And don't forget, all art is valid. See you around.
Bye-bye.